Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to create this acrylic pumpkin painting. I need to begin my painting by drawing in the outline of the pumpkins and the horizon line. So I started with the horizon line. I went about a little bit less than halfway down my paper. And then there's two pumpkins. One is smaller and one is larger. The smaller pumpkin is overlapping the larger pumpkin. I drew those simple shapes in first, just so I have an idea of where to put the ridges in the pumpkin. Once you have those shapes, you can go ahead and draw in the ridges. Notice how they are wider in the middle and then they round at both the top and the bottom. And again, they're following the circle shapes that I drew in first. And after I have the ridges, I'm going to go ahead and put in a stem at the top of the pumpkin. And then I will do the same thing for my smaller pumpkin in the foreground. I'm following the shapes and creating those ridges, making sure that that pumpkin overlaps the larger pumpkin in the background. Once you have the ridges, you can go ahead and erase any unneeded pencil lines. Some of the lighter colors do show the pencil lines through, so it's really important that you clean up your drawing nicely before you begin painting. There is an image that I will share with you of the finished drawing, so you can pause the video if you need to. When I created this video, I had a messy palette, but I did have some paints left and I wanted to paint my background first. So I'm going to have two colors. One is a dark blue, so I'm taking mostly blue, and a little bit of black paint and mixing it together to create a navy blue color. Keep in mind that these paints show up a little bit darker in the video than they do in real life. Once you have the color, go ahead and add it to the background, being careful to go around the details of the stem of the pumpkin and the ridges. I'm going to stop the blue at the horizon line and we'll mix a different color for the bottom. To mix the paint for the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and just add yellow to my dark blue to create a dark green. Go ahead and add more blue or more black if you need to create enough paint to fill in the bottom of the painting. In the video, this paint shows up pretty dark, so just to give you a closer idea, this is what it actually looks like. Once you have that color, you can go ahead and paint the entire bottom, going around the ridges of the pumpkin as well. What I will do is paint each section of the pumpkin individually. So I'm going to start by mixing my paint. I need kind of a reddish orange. So I'm mixing yellow and red together, and then I want to make sure I cover that section really well with enough paint to cover over the paper. I don't want to see any streaks of the white paper underneath. So this might take 1 or 2 coats. Okay, this next step is really important. I'm grabbing white and I'm blending it in with the paint already on the paper. This is why I have to work quickly, because I don't want my paint to dry before I bring in the whites. This is creating a highlight. I'm adding value and I'm making my pumpkin look more three-dimensional. Make sure you blend this in well with the darker orange. So this should go from light to dark as it gets towards the bottom of the pumpkin. You may have to grab a little bit more orange to help blend those colors, but there should be a distinct difference between the top and the bottom of that section in the pumpkin. Okay, I'm going to speed up this video very quickly so this doesn't take too long, but what I'm doing next is I'm filling in most of the sections of that pumpkin the same way. I'm grabbing my darker orange, filling in the space, and then bringing in those highlights with white paint. I'm not going to paint the sections behind the smaller pumpkin just yet because I am going to change the color a little bit, but you want to fill all of these in individually, making sure, of course, to add those whites and those highlights. To create those back two ridges, I'm actually going to add just a tiny bit of blue to that paint. This is going to do two things. It's going to darken the orange, and it's also going to mute the color just a little bit. It still looks orange, but it's just a little bit more shadowy, and that's the illusion I want to create. So I'm going to use that darker orange for those two back sections, still adding white though to highlight the top part of the pumpkin. Once you have that background pumpkin painted, you can go ahead and start with the second pumpkin. This pumpkin is going to be yellower. I want to create a yellower pumpkin because yellow tends to make things look like it's going forward. So this one will use more yellow and a little bit less red. It'll also help us to see the difference between the two pumpkins, so there'll be a little bit of contrast as well. I'm going to paint this pumpkin the same way I painted the first pumpkin. I will fill in one section at a time, and then I will bring in white to highlight the top part of the pumpkin. Once I have both pumpkins painted, I want to take a second and make sure that I'm really covering all of the white spaces around the pumpkin so that there is no white paper showing between the pumpkin and the background colors. I also noticed that the bottom is a bit too harsh, that line between the background and the pumpkin. Normally I would add shadows to the bottom of these pumpkins, but we're trying to keep this fairly simple. So instead, what I will do is mix black with my orange paint, just a little bit of black, and I'm using a paintbrush that doesn't have too much paint on. It's a very light amount of black, and I'm just going to kind of scumble some shadows along the bottom of these pumpkins and blend them in with my hands, or if you want to use a paintbrush, you could do that also. This is softening the line between the bottom of the pumpkins and the ground. And it's also kind of creating some shadows below the pumpkins, which is also adding value to my painting. For the green stem, I'm going to grab yellow, a little bit of blue, some black, and some white. So the black is going to mute the green a little bit and make it a little more gray. And then I don't want it to be super dark. I can add actually some darker stripes into my stem later if I'd like to, which is why I added white to that color as well. Once I have the color I like, I'm going to go ahead and paint both of my stems completely. And then just to add a little bit of detail, I'm going to lighten that green, and I'll add a few stripes, and I will lighten the top parts of those stems. And then to finish off my painting, I'm going to add a few little details, some curls that make it look like a vine. I'm using that light green color again in a really small paintbrush. And then I also added a few leaves to the pumpkins. You can decide, maybe you want to add more leaves, maybe there's leaves blowing around in the sky, or maybe you want to add a moon or stars to the background. Any of these details I think would look nice with this painting. And then once you're finished, go ahead and take off the tape and sign your work. Thank you so much for watching this video with me today. I hope you were able to make a fantastic pumpkin painting.